Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparutade sangamatassa tawara ye sodavanta bamunjantu satang. So on this occasion, Sunday afternoon, I welcome everybody, and I'm enjoying spending this period of time here in New Hampshire with Ajahn Jayanto, Ajahn Anando, and the Sangha. And then to reflect upon Dhamma is one of the joys of this life. And I remember in Thailand years ago, just about my third year with Luang Por Chah, he asked me to give a Dhamma talk on one of the official celebration days. And my Thai was not all that good, and I'd only been a monk for 3 years, and I'd always dread having to do public speaking in public, and so I said I would, but then it was about 3 days to the official day, and I panicked, and I told him, no, I can't do it, impossible. The whole idea of giving a Dhamma talk, I said, I'm not a teacher, I haven't practiced long enough, and Luang Por Chah's response was, you probably know much more about Dhamma than the rest of the people. So, and I never thought of that, actually. So fortunately, it let me off that time, but then at another time, shortly after that, we went up to look at a property north of Ubon City, and that was being offered by villagers to have a branch monastery. And so we looked at the property, it was very nice, we accepted. And then we went into the town, the small town, to the monastery, to the temple in the town. And then out of the blue, Luang Por Chah said, Sumedho is going to give a talk. So my first talk was the public talk on Dhamma was in this small town in northeast Thailand. And Thais are very generous people, so I just said things. Buddhism is a very good religion, I like it very much. And they all said, oh, he speaks Thai very well. So that encouraged me. I wasn't in a group of critical minds that were going to find fault. Luang Por Chah told me they just wanted to hear me say something. But as part of the custom in Luang Por Chah's custom for junior monks to give talks. And so, and then these talks are, when you think you have to be an expert on Buddhism before you can give a Dhamma talk, and then, that kind of thinking makes you say, I'm just not equipped to do that, I don't know enough. And you're creating a sense of your own disability, inability to talk about Dhamma. But Luang Por Chah's Dhamma was always about the way things are. And so he encouraged this reflective, I use this word reflection, to try to encourage you to develop this ability to reflect on the way it is. And is it going to be exactly the same for each one of us, that the way it is right now is exactly the same? And you think the ultimate way it is in terms of the enlightened state, the nibbana, or the way it is as we experience it in the present, here and now. And so this emphasis on awareness here and now, and so the awareness of, I'm not an expert, I'm too shy, I'm too ill-equipped, I don't want to do it, all forms of thinking that would arise in terms of the self-view. And being aware of that thinking is an artificial condition. It's not, we get caught in projecting our thoughts onto the present moment. And so what we feel in the present moment is like this, whether we feel at ease or uncomfortable or peaceful or chaotic or confused, is not the issue. It's not about having the right mood at the right time, but being able to reflect on it. It is the way it is. So one of the emphasis Luang Por Chah in his Dharma talks was to be the puto, the knowing of the way it is. As you experience this present moment, it's like this. And so he'd always say, the way it is, benyang ni hang and Thai. And after a while, this began to sink into my thick mind. And because, I felt, well, the way it is it's okay. I'm okay, or I'm not okay, or but whatever my thoughts would arise in the present moment, I began to observe them, and then through the process of meditation, vipassana, investigating the way it is we have very clear, very helpful teachings about observing, being the witness to the way it is here and now. And that's what I always appreciated in this particular tradition was, the signposts, the directions were very skillful. And those are the basic teachings of the Buddha. In the Pali Canon, the Tripitaka. So in observing the way it is, I found out I would I had an idea that the silence in the present moment, I had to find it. And I had to, I had this fixed idea, which wasn't really wrong, but the silent mind, I had to put a lot of effort in my meditation practice to realize silence. And so I spent a lot of time concentrating and trying to develop the mindfulness of the breath and use the various techniques that were I considered very good. But the whole point was there was this sense of me trying to get something that I began to, this idea that I'm not good enough. I have to do a lot of practice over years to attain real insight became an obstruction, because even in trying to concentrate on the breath, there was so much of my ego involved in it. This sense of I've got to get to the first jhana, the second jhana, I've got to attain, and this sense of me and mine, of being somebody that has to get everything right before I can realize the ultimate, which is nibbana, or complete freedom from delusion. And yet, by using delusion to find ultimate reality, to find nibbana, wasn't working, because the sense of me and mine, I have to get something I don't have, that I heard in a Dharma talk or I read in a book. I began to question that. And the Four Foundations of Mindfulness teaching also is very clear about how to develop awareness of the body, of the feelings, of the emotions, of how we see consciousness through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. But I still interpreted the Four Foundations of Mindfulness from a very Western conditioned mind. The Western conditioning is very much a sense of a separate, unique self. And so the American cultural conditioning is very much promoting a total belief in yourself as your thoughts, your own feelings, your body are definitely what I am, and there's no question of that. And so, to this day, when you listen to the media, you hear this resonating sound of me and mine, and my rights, my views, my opinions, my feelings, all around political correctness about social identities, and on like that, so that we reinforce all the time through thinking and through believing in thoughts as our reality, that we miss the point. We don't know. We're conditioned to do that. We're programmed when we're learning a language. We're programmed to grasp the definitions, the meaning of words, and what's right and what's wrong. And in Shakespeare's play Hamlet, Hamlet is quite reflective, to be or not to be. But and then he says to his two friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, when they come back from England to Denmark, and he's saying, good and evil are neither that, but thinking makes them real. And so that's quite a profound insight. Thinking makes our sense of reality, whether it's deluded or not, we tend to see it through ideas, through thoughts. And we want to define it. What is Nibbana anyway? And so, usually it's defined in English as the highest happiness. But then ask yourself, what is happiness, ordinary happiness? Because when we're happy, we take it very personally. I'm very happy today. And then we want that all the time. We like to be happy. We don't like to be unhappy. And so the highest happiness must be better than this happiness moment, because we see it in terms of personal experience. So the sensual world that we identify with is all about experience. We experience life through the senses. And so our experience is always, it can be changing. It's always changing, in fact, and not always for the better. So, what we experience, the changing of the season here in New Hampshire, and we have to define it as the fall, and then we begin to feel the change of temperature, and then we hear about changes in hurricanes in Florida, and on like that, about the endless way things are changing that make us unhappy. Nobody wants to be living under a hurricane. And then we can look forward to long, hot summers, summer days, warm, and remember them in the cold winter season. And so we reminisce about the past or look forward to the future. But so our reality is based on these illusions of memories that we hold on, how we're conditioned to think, the way we've been programmed to believe in things, in ideals, in all kinds of theories and ideas that we, consider right or wrong. So in the mass media, they talk about this is a severely divided society now, the American society. And so the sense of division and the right side and the left side, when we're grasping these views, then we make it so. Thinking makes it so. That our belief that the United States is a very divided society is a belief that is sent over the internet to the mass media that we tend to believe, or we can disbelieve. We say that's not true. But investigation or reflection on the way it is isn't about attaining anything as a person. After 56 years of monastic life, you say, what have you attained? And an attainment isn't the right word. So it's like you don't attain anything. You let go of everything. So the insight that you have through being witness is in letting go, relaxing, and then that gives us a sense of this panoramic view of life rather than the narrow view that we tend to grasp when we're holding views and opinions about right and wrong. So in reflection, I used to try to stop thinking. I had the insight early on in monastic life. I had to stop thinking. And so that's the best interpretation at that time that I had of the path. But trying to stop thinking is still something that me, as a separate person, must do to realize non-thinking the way it is. So, idea of I've got to let go of everything, of my thoughts, my views, my opinions, my beliefs, helped in the beginning. But then you reach a point where it doesn't work anymore, because when you still have the basic delusion that you are somebody who has to stop thinking. And I couldn't really stop thinking. I could remind myself to let go. I used the two words letting go, and Luang Por encouraged the use of Putto, the Buddha's name, and that certainly worked for a while. It was very helpful. But the basic delusion of it's me that's letting go, me that's chanting Putto, me and mine, and so the being able to reflect on non-thinking. What is that like? And so in Thailand, the monks, meditation monks talk about Jit Wang, an empty conscious awareness, empty consciousness. And then they talk about it, have you attained Jit Wang? And of course, as a person, my personality can't attain Jit Wang, empty consciousness. And as long as that belief that I really am this separate form, this body, this personality, no matter how virtuous I might be, keeping every rule of the Vinaya, obeying all the traditional form, being praised by the society I live in, the sense of a separate self still tend to dominate how I interpreted my practice, my life, and my position as a Buddhist monk. So just trying to stop thinking, or looking for nibbana as a goal, I started listening to thinking. So I had to listen to thinking, I had to put myself in the position of the Putto, the knowing of the present. It's like this. It's to witness thoughts isn't about judging thought as wrong, right or wrong, because that takes thought. Even a bad thought in the present moment, if I consider it bad thought, then I'm, as Hamlet says, thinking makes it so. So how do you get beyond that? How do you get beyond just the habitual way of thinking and identity with virtue? Is to deliberately think. So I started just intentionally thinking. I have to realize nibbana and start thinking I, as a separate person, have to realize nibbana, the goal of the holy life. It's all very idealistic and very good, but it is thought. And then you're listening to yourself, thinking about what you believe is yourself, but is that which is awareness itself. sati sampajanya. Is that a self? Can I claim that as me and mine? And if I do, it's still a sense of, words that I'm somebody who has sati, mindfulness, and clear comprehension of the present moment, that I'm somebody that has realized this, I know what it means. So the proliferating thoughts manifest through this basic belief in a separate self. But then, if I stop thinking, rather than trying to find ultimate reality through words, through definitions, through beliefs, in the Nibbana Sutta, there's this very fine teaching, there is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. And so this Nibbana Sutta is, I began to really investigate. And then the Buddha says, he makes this statement, there is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. If there was not, then there'd be no escape from the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned. And so I began to observe that all thoughts are conditions, whether they're virtuous and high-minded ideals or coarse and low or evil. Thinking is something that is created. It isn't unborn, it's not uncreated. So what is the unborn? And just by investigating my thinking, I began to have insight into the space between the thoughts. Just the sense of I, the English pronoun, I, just one letter. So just by intentionally thinking I began to notice, I began to be aware of the space around I. I arises and ceases in a moment. So then, and then the space between I and am, and the space before you think I, what is that? And so, begin to not be so interested in the definitions, the words, the conditioned programming of the mind, but in the emptiness that underlies the formations. That must be the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. Because as you trust that awareness, that insight into the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, it becomes, you start noticing that all the time. Rather than just in meditation moments and through some kind of technique of intentional thinking, it becomes, you realize that that's reality, that's real, it's not created. The silence, the resonating silence that surrounds the English pronoun I. And we don't notice that. Usually we're conditioned to fill silences with other thoughts, memories, plans for the future. So in our spare time we go on holidays to various resorts and nice places to get away from the pressure and busyness of city life, and then we have to take our computers along with us and our iPhones and on like that to keep the mind busy rather than rest in the silence here and now that is available all the time, whether you're in the middle of New York or in some ideal remote place in the forest. So there is an escape from the born, the created, the form, the conditioned. And through this kind of, it gives you perspective. Silence is the background. Just like in this moment here and now, the space, which is uncreated. We don't create the space. We create the building, which, we can say the space is big or large or small, too small or whatever. Those are thoughts that we have about space. But when you're looking up at the sky, then the space, where does it end? One of the things, like here at the Temple Forest Monastery, Ajahn takes me on buggy rides through the hill outside here, which is very spacious. And just noticing that the sky gives you perspective on the hills and the forest. And so the space is greatly appreciated when you've been lost in the woods all the time. And as soon as you go into the woodland, you lose that perspective into the forest, because there's trees all around, forests and vines and on and on like that can grab your attention. There's your reality. But on top of the hill outside here, the reality is spaciousness. And years ago, in 1980s, when we established Chithurst Forest Monastery in England, it's a forest monastery. And that was the ideal for our tradition, was the Thai forest tradition. And so the ideal place was the forest. And then reflecting in this way, I began, and in Thailand, I lived in the last 2 years before I went to England, I lived at what is called Wat Ba Nanachat, which was a dense forest. So, and then in Thai jungles, they've got all kinds of insects and snakes. You always have to keep focused on the ground where you're walking, because you're barefoot most of the time. And they have these terrible ants at Nanachat, big black ones that cross the paths at night. And if you don't take your flashlight and keep aware of the path through the light of the torch, you're liable to step in the midst of one of these black ants that really have a terrible bite. So I used to have a kuti in the forest at Wat Nanachat at the time, where it was on the main path, and then suddenly you hear monks stamping, doing a kind of jig, trying to shake off these, and you can't kill anything. So in Thailand, it became very, to keep your eyes focused on the ground in the forest was the ideal. But then in England, where the insect life is minimal, and then Chithurst, after 5 years at Chithurst, a beautiful place in West Sussex, southern England, the community had grown. So in 1984, I was wanting to establish another monastery, and we came across what is now known as Amaravati, which is on top of a hill. And my first impression was Amaravati was a school, wooden buildings, looked like an army camp, like a Boy Scout camp, but it was a school for children with disabilities, and it was up for sale, the property. And it was on top of a hill, and the impression I had when I first went there was all this sky. And it really, just my insight alone was having meditated, contemplated, reflected on life, and through many years before that, the insight was this is like a big, huge, endless dome of space, because you get all the perspective around the top of the hill. So these were just my reflections on physical vision, on how we see life through binding ourselves to machines, to things, to the path on the ground, to the dangers on the road, and sometimes we spend our lives constantly looking at things or listening to things without reflecting on the space, the emptiness behind all the forms that we are experiencing in the present moment. So in this intentional, deliberate thinking, because just trying to stop thinking doesn't work. You can only sustain it for a very brief time, and then you go back even more so into thinking again. So just listening to the silence behind the pronoun I. And you don't have to use effort, because it's here and now. If you're trying to use effort, then you miss the point, because you're trying to find what is here and now when you're here and now anyway. So then this silence, I would play with thinking, like my tendency as a personality is trying to be modest. My conditioning is to appear to society as a modest, reasonable person. So I would think I am a modest, reasonable person, and I listen to the space. I'm not interested in the words anymore, or grasping the words, but intentionally thinking this, and then I would think, I am the most selfish, self-centered, narcissistic person in the whole world. And the space behind that scenario is the same silence as I am a reasonable, sensible person. And then I would say, I'm a totally enlightened individual. I'm the best person in the whole world. And the silence is always the same. So, judging from this, with the Nibbana Sutta, this silence behind the sound, behind the conditioning, is here and now. It's not created. So it's uncreated, unborn, unoriginated, unconditioned. But it's like I had a lot of. It was actually quite funny to create yourself from being the worst to the best to just the reasonable, modest. I have my faults. I know that I'm not perfect. Kind of views of oneself, because whatever you think, you tend to. Like if I think I'm the best person in the whole world, my conditioning would think that's not true. That's conceited. That's arrogant. That's overestimation. And then if I think I'm the absolute worst person in the world, then I would think, no, you're not. There are worse people than you. and I think I'm just an average guy. And that the personality tended to agree with. I'm just an average humble, sensible person. And so, just by exploring the way we think, from one extreme, from the best to the worst to the in-between, is all conditioned phenomena. Then what am I if I'm not the body, if I'm not the feelings that I have through the body, through the senses, if I'm not the emotions that I feel about life as I experience through the senses, and if I'm not the senses themselves, what am I? And then the insight comes, there's the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. And that starts becoming, as you trust that insight, you begin to really trust it. Not a belief. You don't believe in silence because it's here and now. It's not about believing in Jitwang or silence or there's a state to attain. It's here and now, apparent here and now, timeless. And the word timeless, santitiko akaliko dhamma, is, timeless, can't be created. Dhamma, conscious awareness, can't be created through thoughts, through ideas, through teachings, through conditioning. But it is unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. We don't create conscious awareness. No matter how hard you might try to do that, you can delude yourself into thinking you're doing something good, or you have moments where you feel very contented and at ease or tranquil or peaceful, depending upon the conditions. But what if the conditions change? So I would investigate, like at Amaravati, where they had this, there are a lot of lawns, green lawns at Amaravati, and they have to mow these lawns. So we get lay people to mow the lawns, and then people offer very good lawn mowers, which make a lot of noise, and so I deliberately began to use the noise of the lawnmower to listen to the silence rather than just react to the irritating sound of the lawnmower. Could I still be aware of silence behind the unpleasant mechanical noise of the lawnmower outside my kuti? And then another experiment was in Thailand. I used to go every year from England to Chiang Mai, to a village in the mountains outside Chiang Mai called Pongyang, where I'd give a week-long retreat, and this was a resort in the hills outside of Chiang Mai, northern city of Thailand, where a very beautiful place had the Dharma hall. The small Dharma hall was near a waterfall, huge waterfall, and then a stream which made the waterfall makes a lot of noise, and the stream makes a noisy stream, and the owner of this resort built the Dharma hall right over the stream. So as soon as you go to this place, to the Dharma hall, then you're surrounded with the sound of this waterfall and the stream, which is repetitious. It's not irritating. I didn't find it irritating, but it, I could still. What is the sound of silence? Is this empty hum background of silence? Is it recognizable in this continuous flow of water. And I began to notice the silence more than the sound of the water. So just in experimenting with noise, with cacophonous noises, with mechanical noises, rather than trying to control life, control the situation so it doesn't irritate me, I began to take irritation, frustration as a way of testing whether this really, you could be totally aware in the silence behind the cacophonous noises that surround you. So it's a way of testing yourself. Life challenges us in our relationships, in the Sangha life, when you have critical moments, the silence behind the doubt, behind the trouble that you're supposed to solve, the crises that arise naturally in human societies. What is the reality behind the crisis or the disturbed feelings in the present moment? It's the silence behind the noise. So that's the end of suffering, because if you trust that, and this is a matter of not believing, you can't believe in it. So it's not about, I'm asking you to believe me, but encouraging you to trust awareness. You can't believe in awareness. You can believe in a concept of awareness, but what is it? Here and now is like this. And then you begin to know the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned is reality itself. And what you previously regarded as reality is not reality. It's a changing, incessant, inexorable changingness of phenomena that is beyond our control. To spend your life trying to find the perfect place, the perfect relationship, is a kind of waste of a lifetime as a human being, because the great gift of humanity is that we can reflect on it. Being human is like this. Being masculine, being a male is like this. Having a female body is like this. And it's not about which is the best or the worst or better or anything like that, but just the awareness is what you are, the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, and not the human being, the man or woman, the condition that you tend to grasp and believe in. So that's, then in terms of the Four Noble Truths, this is nirodha. You begin to, the end of suffering. This Pali word nirodha means the end of suffering, letting go of the causes of suffering. The result is nirodha, or the end of suffering. So you still have a human body, you still have the conditioning of a lifetime, but your relationship to it changes from grasping it, believing it, letting that be your experience of life in a very personal way, to non-attachment. When you see the pointlessness, the suffering you create through attachment to conditions, to phenomena. When you realize that for yourself, not just believe it because the Buddha said, but the Theravada Buddhism is not about believing, it's about trusting in awareness. That's why Buddhism has a lot to offer us at this time, because it's a timeless teaching. It's not an ancient Asian religion like a lot of people think. Like I've been criticized for becoming a Buddhist because it's an old-fashioned religion, ancient to India and so forth. So we've got modern science and psychology now. It's much more advanced. But is it really? Because science and psychology are all about the conditioned realm, the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned, and how to try to deal with conditioning by being someone who has to do something, has to change the conditioning, improve your conditioning, improve yourself as a person, try to make the world better, trying to, or just not caring, just being caught up in your own feelings at the expense of everyone else. So we end up in conflicts that nobody wants, but are inevitable in the conditioned realm. The conditioned realm is all about right and wrong, good and bad, true and false. So and those are going to conflict with each other. Heaven and hell conflict with each other. Heaven we want, hell we don't want. And as long as we believe in heaven and hell, then we can see personality-wise, we want heaven, where everything's perfect, and we don't want hell, where everything's painful and miserable. So these are thinking processes, what they call dualistic thinking, that we tend to unquestionably believe in and share views about it, which endlessly get more complicated and confused as you keep thinking and trying to improve it, or just seeing it in terms of just resigning yourself to fate or destiny. Where in the Buddhist teaching, it's about investigation, reflection on the way it is. So I offer this as a reflection.